All right. Hey, we should be recording and yep, we are ready to go. Um, hey, today's lesson in identifications of Minnesota animals is we're going to focus on large mammals of Minnesota. We got a bunch of them today, okay? We got I think 21 large mammals of Minnesota. And for those of you following along with my class, this is the unit where we like to focus on scientific names. All right. Most of these animals are animals that you grew up seeing and identifying and understanding their names and colorations and differences. And so there's a great unit for us to practice some of those other skills and work on those scientific names. So for the end of the identification week here is going to be a scientific name multiple choice test for the large mammals in Minnesota. All right, so let's dive on in with starting off with the badger. All right, let me move my face so that I am less in the way here. Badger should be one of the, actually a few scientific names that repeat. This first one is Taxidea taxus for the badger. And this is an American badger. It is a flat, furry mammal. When I say flat, it is very. If you see one out in the wild walking around, um, it has a flattened body. Okay, you can kind of see it a little bit in the picture there, but it doesn't work the best for it. They are a burrower. You can see that in those big claws on the front paws of the badger there. They'll dig these huge burrows throughout many of the prairie land and farmland that we have. And they're actually very tolerant, right? They have kind of a ferocious um, connotation to them. But in general, they're very tolerant carnivores. However, if you do happen to back one into a corner or try to surround one and stress them out, then they'll turn around and they'll fight and be aggressive in that manner. But for the most part, they want to avoid you at all costs there. They can be up to 20 pounds and 2 to 3 feet long. So it's a good size animal there. It's got that distinctive coloration on the face and on the nose. Any of you that are Wisconsin fans there, that's you've seen the badger um, striping several times there. Like I said, they're a carnivore and they prefer to live in open prairies and farmlands. Its footprints here, I like this picture because you can kind of get an idea. It kind of tends to walk pigeon-toed as it's walking down. So there's a look at the badger walking in its patterns over there to the right. So number one is badger Taxidea taxus. Moving on to number two is the beaver, and that is a Castor canadensis. That would be the scientific name to the beaver. It is the largest, a little typo there. It's the largest North American rodent. All right, not beaver, largest North American rodent. And it has these large orange front teeth. It's not you can kind of see a little glimpse of it in the picture there, but the front teeth are very orange-like. It's because they're made out of keratin, or a lot of it are made out of keratin. They're continually growing, like all rodents. Their front teeth are continually growing, and so part of their desire to chew is their desire to keep those front teeth in check. It has that obvious flat paddle-like tail that it'll use in construction of its dams. They can be around 35 to 40 inches long, so 3 feet long. On average, they're about 40 to 50 pounds. Up to in Minnesota, the record is 90 pounds for a beaver. I mean, that's huge. Okay, that's a huge animal there. Um, and one of the things about beavers is they actually provide a pretty interesting ecological niche or role in their ecosystem. They generate a lot of diversity within ecosystems by creating ponds and dams and those kind of things. So, a unique player in our, especially the northern Minnesota ecosystems, are beavers there. So, there's a look at a beaver, Castor canadensis. Here's a look at its paw prints. I'm including paw prints here because mammals are things that a lot of these you are going to see throughout the winter time. And, late fall and winter, in spring, we have snow on the ground here in Minnesota. And so you might see these tracks in um, out and about and knowing what they are. And so they have a much larger hind foot. And then the key thing you're going to see there is it's webbed. Okay, so those hind feet are webbed, giving it an advantage in the water. So beaver is a Castor canadensis. Moving on to the bison. It should be the easiest one on the quiz. And their scientific name is bison bison. It should be noted that that is actually not a buffalo. All right. A buffalo is kind of a colloquial term that we have for bison. A buffalo is actually, it's a different grouping of herbivores. And they're over in Africa. Okay. Think about water buffalo over there. The bison got its name, or got the nickname buffalo because the Europeans didn't know what else, what other type of animal to call it, but it's bison's the appropriate name. It used to be very prevalent in Minnesota and throughout the West, Midwest and West. Almost hunted to extinction. All right, they are one of the species we talked about early in the class about conservation. They're like I said, almost on the brink of extinction, and we're on the process of bringing them back. Part of the problem is they require huge amounts of area and are quite a destructive herbivore. Maybe and I'm not sure if that's the right term, but they're massive. Okay, they can be up to 2,000 pounds. Having herbivores that large or roaming around freely in our prairies and woodlands would cause some issues there. So Minnesota is left with a few domesticated populations. So populations that live on ranches or in on farms there. A lot of the bison in the United States are not genetically pure bison. They actually have a decent amount of cattle DNA mixed in with them. I said they can be huge. And this hump on top of their shoulders, that's actually a lot of muscle in there. Bison don't hibernate for the wintertime. They continue to feed. And so that hump on their shoulders is actually a lot of muscle that helps the bison plow snow and then eat the grasses underneath the snow there. So number 3 is the bison. Here's a look at some bison. Let's see, these are South Dakota bison here. All right, so I'm not in Minnesota. Then there's a Wyoming bison down below in the left. That's from Yellowstone. The upper right there is Custer State Park in South Dakota. If you get a chance to go over there, I highly recommend. They have a wildlife loop where you can drive around and see the bison herd. You can see they are a herd-like mammal, and so they take up a lot of space. They move and migrate together as they're traveling there. Next up, we have some bears. All right, and we have some bears. When we talk about Minnesota bears, this is the only Minnesota bear that you will find in Minnesota, and that is the black bear. All right, Ursus americanus is the black bear. They can be 5 to 6 feet long or tall when they're standing up on their hind legs. So you think about it, that's about human size when they stand up. The smaller females can be roughly about 150 pounds, and then the largest of the males can go up to 500 pounds. All right, so a good size animal, not overly massive. The 500-pound ones are fairly rare. All right. Now, when we look at black bears, they can be a little bit confusing with their name because if you look at the two here, the top picture is a black bear. The bottom picture is also a black bear. All right. Even though they have that cinnamon colored coat or almost a brown coat, specifically, those are still black bears. They just have a little different hair color to them. How you can tell is they have these small eyes. Their ears stand straight up. They have a very short tail and kind of a distinct face there. They are in general Minnesota. They don't want to mess with human beings. Okay, they tend to be foragers. All right, so they'll eat berries and roots and dead animals. They're not great hunters, to be honest with you. They will hunt. Usually, it has to be a weak or an elderly or a very young and small prey animal for them to have success. They actually are pretty good climbers as well. You'll see some videos out west of black bears and grizzly bears overlapping, and black bears will climb into trees to avoid the grizzlies there. And the Minnesota population is pretty stable at around 12,000 to 15,000 individuals. Almost all of those in the north. There are some that venture down to the Twin Cities in the south occasionally, but not a defined population of those in the South. So that is a black bear. I should say, should you be out hiking in the woods and you come across a black bear, some general bear safety is don't be quiet in the woods if you know there are bears around. Uh, they don't want any piece of you, and so if they know you're coming, they'll avoid you. They'll move out of your way. But if you happen to surprise one, you're not going to outrun these things. They are faster than you are. So, what's the defense for a black bear? Is to stand, make yourself look as tall as possible, and make a lot of noise. You want to try to intimidate the black bear and stand your ground. And so it'll want to get away and not interfere with you. If you turn and run, it's going to view you as a prey animal, and so it'll chase you down there. So stand and fight when it comes to black bears. The other variety here, sorry, here's a look at black bears, and there's the range. Like I said, they dwell mainly in the coniferous forest, but they'll dip down a little bit out of the northeast as well there. So that first one's the black bear. The fifth one that we have here is the brown or grizzly bear. I included this one in there, even though there is no established Minnesota population. Very rarely do we see any show up in Minnesota. They would be mainly out west and further north. But it's a fearsome predator in our continent, so I felt the need to talk about it here. Like I said, these are not found in Minnesota. They are significantly larger than the black bears are, coming in at up to 1,300 pounds, almost twice the size for some of the larger individuals. Same, they can be about 5.5 to 9 feet long. Now we're talking. So the average one is going to be taller than a human when they stand on their hind legs, and some of the massive ones can be almost 9 feet tall. How do you tell the difference? All right, these are almost always going to be a brownish color. They have that shoulder hump that you see there, and then their face, if you can see it better, is kind of scooped. All right, so it's concave is their face there. Like I said, they're a much burlier looking bear. These are large predators. They still rely mainly on foraging, because most of their diet is berries and roots and eggs and eggs. That's a weird one. Insect larvae actually is a ton. Honey. They will eat wounded or weak game. They will hunt occasionally. But this, I mean, like I said, this thing's massive. It's not going to be that great of a hunter because it can't sustain a long time running. Very fast and short burst, but after a mile or so, it's going to start tiring out as it's going. With the brown or grizzly bears, here's a look at that paw print of a grizzly bear next to a human paw print, so you can see just the massiveness of them. With the brown and grizzly bears, your best defense, other than bear spray, is to play dead. All right, they are not going to be, they're bigger than you are, so they're not going to be intimidated. They're faster than you, so running away is not going to be a great strategy. But playing dead, letting the bear sniff you and realize you're not a threat, oftentimes they're confused and they want to get away from you regardless there. So here's a look. I like this map. This shows the current range of grizzly bears. All right, so grizzly bears are prevalent in Alaska and northwest Canada, and they dip down into that greater Yellowstone ecosystem, Glacier National Park, and spots of Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, etc. there. So there's a grizzly bear. Ursus arctos is the grizzly bear. All right, some cats coming up next. Number 6 is a bobcat. All right, Lynx rufus is the scientific name for the bobcat. Now the range is here, all right, and mainly in the Northeast. There are definitely bobcats that travel and are in southern and western Minnesota and Wisconsin and those places as well. So don't let the range be deceiving. They do travel a great distance there. They have a very short tail. That's where it gets its name for the bobcat. It has black spots throughout the animal. It can be about 20 to 30 pounds, so it's a big cat, and they're excellent carnivores. All right, so they're going to hunt small mammals. Some of the largest bobcats will actually go after small deer, even because they are such a efficient predator. I don't know if you knew that about house pets, but your cat is a far better hunter than your dog is. Your dog evolved from animals that hunted in packs, where your cat, we specifically bred cats for their hunting abilities. So Cats are a far superior hunter. These can be trapped, as in hunters can trap them and sell their pelts. It used to be common throughout Minnesota. Now they're a little bit less common in the southern portions of the state due to trapping and loss of habitat of the bobcat. Very similar to the bobcat, one that is going to be a struggle on the ID test is the Canadian lynx here. Okay, so the Lynx canadensis. If you look at it, it looks really similar to the bobcat. Biggest difference being its coat is a little fuller because it tends to exist north of Minnesota. It's got a little longer points on its ears, a little more of a beard to it. And if you saw its paws, it has much larger paws than a bobcat. All right. They're only seen in the northern part of Minnesota. They don't they like the cold climates. They do really well in the snow with those large paws, etc. there. So large snowshoe feet. They have long ear tufts and goatee. Like I said, they primarily eat snowshoe hares. So they're going to hunt these hares that we haven't learned yet. But they is their primary species, and they are federally threatened. Okay, so the national government has acknowledged that they are not endangered, but one step before endangered. All right, the Canadian lynx there. There's a look at its paws. I know it's not the best look, but you can see the bobcat on the right there, and the Canadian lynx. Just the massive paws that it has for running on snow. Our last cat here is number 8, the mountain lion, Puma concolor. All right, maybe you've heard it called a cougar or a puma before. They're all the same species. They are a monotone in color, that kind of that brownish look, but they have a black tip on their tail. The nose all the way to the back of the tail is about 6 feet, roughly about 140 pounds. These are ones that you're very rarely going to see, but they are in our ecosystems. They are an elusive and very quiet hunter. They tend to move at night. They are very stealth as they hunt. And we don't have a good idea on their population size because they are a lot more solitary hunters there. But we definitely do see mountain lions around. Usually only their prints are what we find. Like I said, they're large, sparsely populated territories. One mountain lion can cover several square miles in distance. And these are ones that you might not see a mountain lion in the woods, but they're definitely going to be seeing you. That's kind of a creepy one that something to be aware of with mountain lions. There's a nice look at a mountain lion. There are the current established mountain lion territories in the United States there. All right, some more dog-like animals coming up next. The coyote, Canis latrans there, sorry. This is Minnesota's most abundant large predator. They are everywhere, all right? They're in the cities, they're in the country, they're in the woods. They actually, I always think they resemble kind of a small and leaner German Shepherd, all right? So they're a very lean dog-looking animal. Weight wise, they're about 25 to 30 pounds. They move and hunt in packs, and they have a recognizable yipping sounds usually. They have bushy tails, large ears, usually shades of brown in their thick coat. Roughly in just the state of Minnesota, about 4,000 are trapped or killed and sold for their pelts throughout the state. And they're really becoming some urban pests, maybe not necessarily in our neck of the woods because we still have a lot of woods, but I think a lot about like California has a coyote problem where they're moving into the cities and they're grabbing small dogs. Even suburbs of Minnesota and Iowa where housing developments are moving into where there used to be wooded areas and coyote habitat where they'll go in and hunt in people's backyards there. So number 9 is the coyote. 10, the gray fox. I'm not even going to give that scientific name a chance there. You guys can read it as far as what that goes. I don't know what that Latin or Greek means there, but the gray fox is very small. It weighs around 8 to 14 pounds, so very small dog size. They're shaped like a dog, and they have a gray coat with a black tip on their tail. And they're actually really good tree climbers, believe it or not. So they'll climb into trees to hunt squirrels and other small mammals. These are actually their numbers are starting to fade a little bit because coyote numbers are through the roof. Normally, in a balanced ecosystem, there'd be more wolves and bears and those kind of things to keep the coyote numbers down. Well, without that, the coyote numbers are climbing and the gray fox numbers are starting to fall as a result of that. So see that mainly in the away from the coniferous biome and in the deciduous and grassland biomes. That leads us to the gray fox's cousin, the red fox, Vulpes vulpes. I shouldn't say cousin, but you know what I mean there. They are common throughout Minnesota. You see these a decent amount. They're not a ton, but you do see them a decent amount. They tend to be a night hunter, and so when I've seen them, it's been early morning. They'll be traveling to their den for the day. They're kind of a medium dog size, so 20 to 30 pounds. They have that really nice looking rusty red coat with the white tip on their bushy tail. They actually sound like a dog when they bark, and they are the most common small predator in the state. So quite a few red foxes out there. Their population is just fine, and they're really athletic. They can run up to speeds of 30 miles an hour and leap 15 feet and from a long jump standpoint. So not bad at all. The red fox, Vulpes vulpes. That leads us to the largest wolf family, dog family, wolf family, whatever you want to call it, in the state, and that is the gray wolf or the Canis lupus, also known as the timber wolf, etc. There's 2,800 roughly wolves in the state, so a fairly healthy northern Minnesota population. Wolves are very, very large, dog-like animals because they can be up to around 70 to 110 pounds. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, my dog's 100 pounds. Usually, if your dog's 100 pounds, it has a lot of extra fat and weight. Wolves do not have a lot of extra fat and weight, so it's usually muscle that weighs up to that much. Their coats can be all kinds of different colors, black, gray, white, even reddish. When it comes to habitat, they're generalists. They'll live in woodlands, they'll live in the prairies, they'll live in the conifers, etc. And they're hunting mainly large hoofed mammals. So one of our few predators that will actively hunt prey that's larger than themselves. Okay, so they will make their living off of prey bigger than they are. In Minnesota, that means deer and moose. They need large stretches of habitat for the different wolf packs to run. In 100 years ago, they were nearly exterminated to extinction. In fact, in the United States, the only wolf population that was left was the Minnesota wolf population. And so that population continued to live and help establish other wolf populations in the country. There's been a lot of conservation efforts in order to bring the wolf back, and they've been successful. Typically in Minnesota, pack dynamics usually exist. When I say packs, usually it's about groups of 5. Okay, so a little smaller packs than you'd see in northern, up in Canada or northern, Montana, etc. But then again, these wolves aren't usually bringing down bison where they need, 15 to 20 members in the pack there. So gray wolves, here's their range in the United States. Here's a look at the paw print, like I said, about the size of a human hand in there and like that. Okay, let's go through these last ones a little bit quicker. I'm taking a little bit too long on this presentation. A lot of good stuff to talk about. Elk, Cervus elephas would be the elk scientific name. Used to range throughout Minnesota all the way down into the state of Iowa. There's only a few individuals up in northern Minnesota right now that are established. They're a deer family. They're a much larger deer, though. They can weigh up to 900 pounds. They have this telltale reddish brown body with a darker neck and face, and then the white rump or the white butt back there. They're grazers. Okay, so they'll move through prairies and woodlands and eat the understory. Currently in Minnesota, we have 130 individuals. Here's a nice look at a bull elk down there. That nice, it looks like a 6x6 or 7x7 rack on that thing. Similar to the elk, we have the moose. That is the largest animal in Minnesota. It is our moose population. They can be 950 to 1,200 pounds, the Minnesota variety. In Canada, they get larger because they have to survive harsher winters. And their antlers alone can weigh up to 40 pounds. So big species there. They prefer living in wetland biomes, so in the bogs and marshes and swamps in the northern parts of the state. They have a bell, which is a flap of skin hanging below the neck. They're also herbivores, and they're big time grazers. They can hold 100 pounds of food on it in its stomach as it's grazing, waiting to digest it. All right, so there's a nice look at the moose. Here are the two moose ranges in the state of Minnesota, and we have a pretty healthy balance or population of moose in the state there. There's a look, we can't watch this, of moose running through the snow. They're excellent at maneuvering large amounts of snow. 15, the white-tailed deer. There's a scientific name. We should all know what the white-tailed deer is. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. We'll talk more about it later. But white-tailed deer, they got the white neck and face, the white tail, obviously. They can be 50 to 300 pounds, 100 pounds of big white-tailed deer. It's a little bit different than the mule deer there. Fawns are born with spots. Here's a look at the right side is the white-tailed deer like we have here in Minnesota. To the left, kind of grainy looking, but there's a mule deer. You notice it's a little bit bigger. Its antlers are going to be shaped a little bit different. I always think white-tailed deer, they tend to have that single antler coming out and then branches coming up off of it, where the mule deer, its antlers bifurcate, meaning they go out, they split in two, they split in two, they split in two again, etc. there. So look at the difference between the mule deer and the white-tailed deer. No mule deers in the state of Minnesota. All right, a couple left. Porcupine. All right, there's a scientific name for a porcupine. Porcupines are small, moving, kind of middle of the road size animals. They are coated in quills that we're all familiar with. All right, so there's a look at a porcupine quill down there. Now this is the microscopic view. Okay, so if you were to zoom way in and you see this quill, you see all these little almost like scales poking backwards. That's what gets stuck in your skin. All right, so it jabs you, and then those things make it tough to get that quill out. They don't shoot the quills, but they can slap you with their tail and inject the quills that way. Adults can be 18 to 35 pounds. They're herbivores. They're not hunted or trapped in any way. They're not really a desirable species. They're just kind of cool to look at. Very few predators. Most of them are smart enough to not go after them. Some dogs are not smart enough to learn that lesson the hard way. But fishers that we'll be talking about later are actually one of the few predators that will actively hunt out porcupines. 17, raccoons. There's a scientific name. We should know what raccoons are. They have that very distinct facial coloration. They eat all kinds of different stuff. So this is one of the few species that does better around humans than out in the wild. Okay, they're highly adapted to surviving off of our cities, our civilizations. They will eat just about anything, and they have very dexterous hands. They can get into garbage, get into coolers, get into all kinds of things. There's roughly 1 million in the state. They are heavily trapped and hunted, and they can be very vicious fighters. Right, you have to be careful with your animals around raccoons because since they have those opposable thumbs, they can grab and tear and be kind of nasty things there. So, raccoon for 17. 18, North American river otter, a cool species here. They are primarily going to be living in lakes and ponds and streams. They do, they burrow on land, obviously, but they're excellent swimmers. They're slowly starting to make their way into Minnesota, in particular, southern Minnesota, again, after being trapped to non-existent in our state. They have webbed feet. They have really short, dense fur that makes it well insulated. They are extremely efficient carnivores. All right, they will decimate fish populations just because they're, like I said, they're excellent swimmers and hunters in the water. There's an estimated of 12,000 river otters in the state, and they do swim better than many fish do as they're going. So, North American river otter, we'll skip over Snoop Dogg talking about them. 19, we got 2 skunks and then a possum left. So 19 is the striped skunk. There's the scientific name. It has a single stripe on its nose and then 2 stripes. And then these 2 stripes going down its back. You can see the right side there. It's roughly the size of a cat. There are very few predators that go after skunks. One that we talked about was the great horned owl earlier that will actually actively go after this thing. They don't want to spray it. They'll hiss and try to avoid spraying, but when they do, they will use those scent glands and fire a very odoriferous oil at you that stinks and is hard to wash off different things. They're omnivores, so they'll eat a little bit of everything. And they're actually the most common animal to have rabies in the state of Minnesota. So if you see skunks out in the during the daytime, kind of acting funny, they probably have rabies. And their spray has about a 15-foot range on that thing, so a decent range. 20 is a different type of skunk that we don't see a lot of or hear a lot about, and that's the eastern spotted skunk. There's a look at it. It looks cuter than the regular skunk is. It's a protected Minnesota species. It's frequently trapped. Even though it is protected, we're able to trap it in sustainable amounts. It's slightly smaller. It has a lot more complex or broken stripe system compared to our other skunk. It likes open lands with lots of cover, including man-made structures. And they are nocturnal. That's why you don't see a ton of eastern spotted skunk. Here's a look. There's a look at that skunk warning it's going to spray soon. And it is found kind of throughout the state, okay, in random populations there. And lastly, the Virginia possum. All right, there's the scientific name. It is the only marsupial in North America, meaning it gives birth to its offspring prematurely and they mature in the pouch of the possum mother. Population has grown from southeast United States all the way to northern Minnesota. They're an excellent survivor in species. They find a lot of different niches to fill. They're good tree climbers. Prehensile tails, meaning their tails can grab onto branches and whatnot. They're about the size of a house cat. They have a white tail and a pink nose with a white face. They give birth to a large litter each year. They will eat just about anything, including a large amount of insects. All right, so they'll eat a ton of insects. So they're generally good to have around your property there. And their defense mechanism is to play dead. Everyone's heard of the possum playing dead. It's a good defense mechanism for it. And oddly enough, they're also immune to many snake venoms. A weird fact about them there. So there was a lot of information there about large Minnesota mammals. Check that out at your leisure.